Peacemaker fights a bunch of Deathstroke babies. So that's...
You said what?
He fights a bunch of Deathstroke babies.
No, I heard the words you said.
Yeah.
What do they mean next to each other?
They made.
I understand each word individually. I would like to know what they mean when you said them all in a row.
There was a bunch of clones of Slade Wilson, of Deathstroke, as babies, and the babies attack Peacemaker.
It's funny. You've explained it. I actually understand less now. Whatever.
Yeah.
Sweet Christmas.
Shout out to my birds.
Hello. This is Che.
And this is Corey.
And this is the Next Time On Podcast, a podcast where two lifelong friends discuss all things amazing and all things fetid in popular culture. And for our final of the best of 2023 episodes, we are bringing you the best comic books of 2023 and some of the worst stuff too, because
some
that
of
is
them.
who
Not
we
a lot.
are. No, not a lot. A lot of great comics this year. Just a couple points of business before we get in, because we are on a true high of like 3 days in a row of recording, and feels like 4 million hours of editing.
We're also both a bit sick, so I apologize.
If you're wondering why this is
nasally
happening in
voice.
2024, if this is your first you've listened to, we did a little disclaimer at the top of the first episode, which you should go check out, the best TV of 2023. We got sick at the end of the holidays, and it delayed some of our plans. But listen, the first couple days of 2024, that's basically 2023, so it doesn't matter.
Yeah, it's fine.
But before we jump into the episode, a couple points of business. First of all, like I said, go check out the other two episodes for the best of movies and best of TV shows. They should be in your podcast feed already, or you can go over there and check them out at nexttimeon.net. Or, most importantly, it feels like, I don't know, most importantly, listen wherever you want, but equally importantly as everywhere else, go over there at youtube.com/@nexttimeonpod to check out the video episodes for all of our podcasts, all of our future stuff. Go over there, drop a like and subscribe. It's a really good time over there. And you can follow us at nexttimeonpod on all your social media platforms as well. And that's kind of it. We've got some big stuff planned for 2024. Got real, I hate the word content, but some content plans for you guys. And
We are content creators, Jay.
Are we?
Yes, we got to make
It
that
just feels
sweet,
like
sweet content.
calling us the same thing that you call, like, this is bad because I'm not going to be able to like pull a content creator out of my ass. Who's the one that had a Hulu show for a second?
I genuinely have no idea what you're talking about.
Charlie.
Sure.
The only thing in my head is Charlie Hebdo, but that's the magazine that did the hate crime.
Okay.
You don't remember Charlie
God,
Hebdo?
Let's keep going, man. I have no idea what the fuck you're talking about.
Charlie D'Amelio, I got there. I'm hip. I know what the kids like.
I don't know what the fuck you're talking. Just keep going with the episode. I don't know what the fuck that is.
This is the episode now, Corey. I've lost my mind fully. But Corey's right. We are content creators. So go over there and follow us for all of our fucking content. It's going to be fire. We got Oscar stuff planned. Our next episode is going to be our most anticipated stuff of 2024. And I'll be honest with you, some stuff I've looked up, just prep for it, looks like a really good year for a lot of stuff, including soon on the docket, the new season of True Detective, which I'm very excited for. But we will save all that for next episode. Right now, we're talking about great picture books. But first, of course, Corey, despite the fact that this is a celebration of good art, we must start with the bad stuff, because you can't have good art without bad art. And what are some of the worst comic books this year, Corey? We want to start off?
Sure. My first comic book of the worst of the year.
This feels unfair, but I mean, it's, you're right. You're right.
No,
You're right.
it's fine. It's fine. It's good to just dunk on this guy. So, one of our, I think, least liked authors on the podcast is Mark Miller.
I think I would have had him number one for a very long time. Shout out to my boy Bendis, who has taken the crown, who writes the worst shit I've ever read now for some reason.
So here's the thing. Bendis is a bad writer, Mark Miller offends me.
Yeah,
I think
okay,
that's
fair
the
enough.
that's the differences between the two of them. Mark Miller is the king of elevator pitches, but he's so fucking bad at writing.
He elevator pitched himself into a Netflix deal and then has made, I don't think, anything, like one TV
No, I don't
show?
think so. Nothing. No TV shows. I think they took some of his properties to make stuff. I've not watched any.
Well, I don't think they really. There was like one or two that have come out.
like,
They gave him a
yeah.
massive deal. He has a huge catalog, and they just are not making these shows for some reason.
So it's taking that huge catalog that he has. He decided to make his own crossover series and call it Big Game, which treated it virtually as a sequel to Wanted, a comic book that Shay and I both have so much love for.
Should we do our first ever Curse of the Reread on Wanted?
That might actually be a good idea.
I
because
haven't gone back to read it in years since I liked it as a dumb child, and I'm sure that book is unreadable.
it's just like kind of like to seeing this idiot who's just also very crass and just offensive with his work try to make his own stuff seem smart and important, where once you actually finish it. So I gave it a fair shake because I'm at least interested to see what he does with it, and I read the entire time, and I wish I could get my time back from reading that shit. Because there's so much good that came out this year.
Yeah.
And for some reason, I'm like, let me just spend an afternoon reading this bullshit.
It's not even like fun schlocky trash like you would think.
Well, like on paper.
I did the same thing. Like I picked up the
Yeah.
Ambassadors this year, and I don't really know why. And I read a lot of the Ambassadors, more than I care to admit.
And I kind of want to ask you questions about it, but at the same time, I don't give a fuck because they also have a big.
I don't have answers to your questions.
They have a huge part of this book, and then they all just die for some reason. It's like also like the entire thing ends up being a giant like time travel bootstrap paradox. So not everybody who died.
Oh,
Like, because
no,
that's
shocking.
shocking. I know, but it's just like, oh great, so we spent most of this book not about this, and these people being dead and how to react to it, just to bring them back for a couple splash pages at the end, because comics. It just disappoints me, and I even afterwards I went back and I watched read Reborn. I think that's like Reborn or Rebirth, which might actually be his best comic book. Besides
I still
Huck.
sort of. I was gonna say I still kind of ride for Huck.
Yeah, they nuke Huck.
Oh, Huck's in it.
Huck's in it.
Shout out to my boy Huck.
He gets nuked.
Yeah, okay.
He gets better, but he gets nuked, and he's just gone for half the book because he just gets nuked.
Wait, and then he gets better?
Because of time travel.
Are you using the word nuke figuratively, or
Like
did they drop
no, a
nuclear bomb on
literal.
Huck?
They literally dropped a nuclear bomb
What's
on
wrong
Huck.
with Mark Miller?
As he was, I think he was saving a polar bear cub, so he was double. What the fuck is going on? What do we?
Corey, what the fuck are you talking about?
I don't fucking know. A shit comic book. Jay, what's your worst of the year? Give me one before I go on another rant about this shit.
As I said before, I could have easily picked the Ambassadors, which I guess I have mentioned, and any number of the Brian Michael Bendis stuff I read this year, and I don't really know why. I just keep doing it to myself out of morbid curiosity.
I keep Bendis
or because I
as
think
my,
it'll be funny content, and it never is funny content because I usually just this sucks. I hate it.
I don't even want to go back to Bendis because I'm still I'm mad about him by doing a lot of things, but at the same time, it's he did Ultimate Spider-Man,
Yeah.
and some good Avengers.
Well, that's the
books.
thing is that's why Bendis annoys me more now because it's what happened? I don't. He's been on our list before. I think Joy Operation was our worst comic of
Oh yeah,
last
that
year.
was horrible.
And it's one of the worst things I've ever read. But anyway, I said I don't want to talk about Bendis. I'm talking about Bendis. My first pull is a book we talked about on this podcast, and a book that we both thought had an excellent first volume.
I still will say,
genuinely excellent first volume.
you guys can go buy the first volume of this book and have a good time. Just don't go back to it. Just accept it at the end and just leave it alone.
The problem is, I don't. The first one doesn't end in a place where I'm content. I
No,
need the story to
I
keep
know.
going. And then this book I'm talking about is Once Upon a Time at the End of the World by Jason Aaron, a guy whose work I think basically, other than this, I've exclusively really enjoyed. And again, this is why it's on my list. It's just extreme disappointment. Brought to me by a guy I really like. First volume, first 5 or 6 issues. I don't remember exactly how long that first volume is, but first couple issues, very good. And then literally there's page 1 of the second issue. It just goes batshit crazy. It just starts to being about this weirdly sexual book about teenagers. And as I've said on this podcast before, in relation to my rant about Saltburn yesterday, I am unscandalizable. My issue with this book is not that it's about sex. I like sex. Sex is great. I hate nothing more than when people can't write sex. It's so irritating. It's so hard to read. It makes my skin crawl.
And it's weirder too when people can't really write that. And it's like in a book, it's just like those horrible, it's horrible prose.
Yeah.
Where I'm personally very much like, you guys can just say they fucked and we can just come back to it. I don't really need you to walk me through the old intricacies of the thing. But it's a weirder thing to spend 20 pages looking at it.
Yeah. Yeah. It is. And the thing is, I kept reading because I was like, oh, this is a weird turn for this book, but surely it'll go back to what the beginning of the book was about. And it doesn't. It doesn't. It continues to be about these two people having sex. And I don't get why. Jason, if you're listening, I love your work, man. Come on the pod and talk about what the fuck happened. We need to know. It genuinely confuses me. It's so weird.
Love Immortal. I love his Thor run. Not Immortal Thor. I loved his Thor run.
We talked about the Thor run for years. As both of us have said, it's probably the best Marvel ongoing ever. It's in the conversation for how long and how good it was for a character that nobody really thought should have been that good. Listen. I love Sea of Stars. I love Sea of Stars. I don't need to keep telling you how much I like Jason Aaron because we're just saying this.
We like Jason Aaron. This book is weird. What happened? All right.
What's your next one, Corey?
I think this is much more of just a plea / yelling at Spider-Man editorial, but my book is Amazing Spider-Man, written by Zeb Wells, which has confused me as someone. I don't remember when it started. I didn't feel like looking it up, but I mean, this year it's been pretty shit to kind of go through. Mm-hmm. But just a consistent decision of events that this book decided to go through, and it essentially seems like it's like doesn't like Peter Parker. And just wants to make a story where they just kind of show off why no one likes him. So the book starts off with like every superhero being mad at him. We don't know why. They don't really give much of an information for. Mary Jane ended up in a portal or some bullshit like that where she was trapped for a year. While Spider-Man does his best effort to get her out, time works differently. Whatever, he gets her out. Now she's in love with this other guy and has kids. So basically he has to contend with that the entire book. Whatever, I guess that's just kind of how we're going to treat Spider-Man. Not really for any fucking reason. It's just kind of something we wanted to do to him. Then we also decide to kill Miss Marvel, a woman who's going to be in a movie this year and also had a very successful TV show. We kill her. Don't worry, she gets better within a month. But let me just make it clear that a book about a white dude involved a person of color dying as like an afterthought. And then the most of the book afterwards was more concerned about how he grieved about a character that he barely knew. The Amazing Spider-Man book is in a horrible state right now.
That's how I feel about a lot of Marvel would start the year. It's getting better. It's gotten a lot better over recent months.
I don't know what it is between like big editorials when it comes to this. Like even like Zeb Wells did a really good job on Hellions. I liked Hellions, so I was kind of like, okay, like this guy can write humor and a pretty good story together. This was going to be kind of good. And I think the same note, not nearly as bad because I think the book got a lot better, but got the more shit. I won't even get into that entirety of the Batman event this year. But Chip Zdarsky, who I'm going to mention in a second, is one of my, he's been one of my favorite authors. He gets over to Batman, everything seems to go kind of fucky. Is it editorial's fault? I don't actually know what the pressure might be.
Right? I wonder if it's
because these are like the flagship books for each of these. Like these are the ones that sell the best no matter what. So why do you make a book that kind of seems like angry at Spider-Man fans and like kind of once again being like, hey, you want Mary Jane and Spider-Man to be happy together? Like, in every other fucking piece of media that involves the two of them? How about we just make you watch Peter Parker just look at his, ex-wife just be with another guy while he's just kind of having no room for closure? And that's supposed to be fun reading?
We talked about this in relation to Batman too in DC. I think they just are so precious about these properties. They're big ones that they probably are just too hands-on, right?
It has to be what it is.
It's the same reason why, I think, Guardians, the first movie, was probably so successful because Marvel was like, well, this is like a punt. We'll just let James Gunn sort of cook. But they had their fingers in all the pots for all those first movies about, Thor and all this stuff. I think they get really fixated on what they think is going to be precious IP. and don't care so much when authors go off to write Squirrel Girl and then or Gwen, Spider Gwen.
I just kind of like, at this thing, it confuses me because like Spider-Verse is so successful and the secondary characters, Peter Parker being happy with a family. And then like, I mean, the Spider-Man Homecoming or like the Homecoming series, where it ends, like it doesn't end in like a happy place, but at least it like makes sense why it's there when it's there. This one just kind of felt like someone just doesn't like Peter Parker and they just want to make his life unnecessarily shit for like not even a good story. That's not the thing. It would be better if it's a good story. But right now, it's just a bad time. But let's go back over to you. I don't really want to harp more and talk about actually some good books and not just my disappointment with the treatment of Spider-Man currently. How the hell is Nightcrawler the best Spider-Man book right now? That makes no fucking sense at all. How is Nightcrawler the best Spider-Man right now? That makes no fucking sense.
I think that's to my point, though, right? They're like,
that is your point, but
we'll let them write a weird, fun Nightcrawler book, and when it comes to the Spider-Man main thing, we'll have our executives have constant meetings about it. I'm sure that's what it is, because like you said, Zeb Wells is a good writer, and yeah,
it's just like it seems like
we had the same thing with Tom King and Batman. Like Tom King,
exactly.
Batman.
Well, that's what I'm saying. Like it's like Chip Zdarsky, same thing. They both had Batman, and now everyone's like, these runs suck, and I'm like, maybe it's not them.
Yeah,
it's not like Tom King was the one who called off the wedding. But that's a different
note.
A
funny sentence. Comic books are stupid, guys.
They are stupid.
Speaking of stupid comic books, my worst, again, it's not something that's actually one of the worst things I read this year by any stretch of the imagination, but I just needed to pick out Ultimate Invasion because it's the kind of thing I don't like about event books so much, where I think at the end of this we talked about like what was the point of any of this?
Well, that's a fuck. I mean, the reason I don't have this on my list really is because the weird thing about it is they put out that one shot, which basically was the 5th issue of this book, which was really confusing to me. I'm like, why was this not just included in the initial run? Because it ties up and answers so many questions that I hope it's actually included whenever they collect these couple books into like putting them out there, because like it like kind of answers and lays the groundwork for everything afterwards. But then is
it going to even have any effects? Like it just felt like this book got dropped and they ran off.
Well, I mean, the whole thing is supposed to be like the relaunch for the Ultimate line of comics. So I think if it's supposed to just establish what the world is going to be before I guess we drop into these characters. And it does seem like there will be some, like, I mean, that's the hard thing about Jonathan Hickman is like he does leave these hints and trails to kind of come back to later on. But as we saw kind of with X-Men, if he doesn't come back, there's issues.
This is 4,000 different X-Men runs. None of them make any sense. Yeah, I don't know. Like I said, it's not the worst thing I read this year, but there was these 4 issues. I just felt when we read that first issue, I was like, okay, they've introduced a lot. Jonathan Hickman's introduced a lot. And I remember us saying, we're like, okay, interesting issue. I hope we get some resolution here. And then I read issue 2 and I was like, well, they've introduced a lot more. I hope we get some resolution here. And then I read 3 and 4 and I had the exact same reactions. And then at the end I went, what the fuck just happened? Who are any of these people? Was this story at all important? I feel like I'm losing my mind a little bit, but you know.
To answer your question, it is important. They didn't pace it correctly. The 5th issue actually does answer a lot of questions, but that shouldn't be necessary, and that does not excuse the fact that this miniseries wasn't well put together.
I'm just like I said, I just pulled it out because I think it's indicative of like a lot of the stuff that Marvel was doing this year that really annoyed me, which is like trying. Oh, it was like and I'm Corey, strap in. I'm about to make a football reference. It's like every single play was a Hail Mary, and they were just like throwing it down the field every time. Here's a huge new team book. Here's a big event book. And it felt like every week I would tune in for a new event where there was 4 different spin-offs released at the same time. And I was like, how do you expect anybody, even diehard comic book fans, to care about any of this shit if you keep churning it over and over again at the hope that like something will hit? And I just think it's not actually that difficult to run a comic book company because there's so many great writers. Give great writers interesting characters to write and let them write it, and then poof, you have good comic books. And that it feels like Marvel is learning that lesson. But at the beginning of the year, I was really sort of down on Marvel's future as a comic book company.
I will say this in my top 10. I will touch on a book that I do feel like does answer those questions for you.
Mm-hmm.
The problem is it's just so tied deeply into Marvel-ness of it that I feel like it's hard to be presented as its own thing without having some kind of point of reference for a lot of things like that, which is difficult for this kind of things. But how about we move into our honorable mentions?
Yeah, let's talk about some good stuff.
Sure. And
comics that just missed our list, our top 10.
Just missed our list, but I feel like some of them So for this first book, I picked out Daredevil, written by Chip Zdarsky and Marco Cicchetto. Their multi-year run has finally come to a close. I believe it came to a close earlier in the year. But I didn't want to put this in my top 10. I think I had it in my top 10 last year, mostly because I don't really much new to say about it. I think this run has really cemented itself as being another one of those very well done Daredevil runs that Marvel. I mean, it's weirdly the most consistent creator book in Marvel Daredevil, and I think that Chip and Marco have left a really good mark on it, told a really, really solid story, and I'm glad they were able to write it and do it on their own terms. Devil's Reign was really solid, but I think this entirety of this Daredevil run, I think it's 2 volumes.
Is this what? This is To Heaven Through Earth is the subtitle for
I believe that was the end of it, and I'm pretty sure it involves...
That's the 4th volume, right? Okay.
I think it ends with Daredevil going to either hell or heaven.
Right.
So, that's just,
Hey, listen,
that's
like
cool.
we said, comic books are stupid, but we love them. What are you going to do?
We do love them, yeah. But no, I really recommend this Daredevil run. I believe it's like 2 big-ass, chunks of things, but I think in total...
It's a pretty meaty trade I picked up.
Yeah, so both of them are pretty... I mean, the entire run is very, very solid. I really recommend it if you want to get into something Daredevil, and I think Chip and Marco did a really good job.
Agreed.
Jay, what you got?
A book from another team of creators that I've talked about a ton. I don't know if we ever actually talked about this book on the podcast. I know Corey and I have talked about it a bit, but this is the Enfield Gang Massacre by Chris Condon and Jacob Phillips, who longtime listeners will know, or comic book fans will know. This is the team that brought us That Texas Blood, one of my favorite books of the last few years. And this is very much in the same vein. It's a take on a classic old Western tale. Basically, the Enfield Gang is seemingly framed for a crime. And the Enfield Gang is like a fun, hapless bunch of criminals who does fun robberies and nice robberies, which is always my favorite shtick in a Western. But then they get framed for a horrific murder and get chased after by a bloodthirsty sheriff. And it's just it's great. These guys are great writers. They do Westerns very well, as evidenced by the fact that, like I said, that Texas Blood, which I do think is better than this. If you guys are looking for a work by these guys to pick up, I would say start there. It's excellent, really, really great. But a lot of the stuff that's good in that it spills over into Enfield Gang Massacre too as well. I'm really enjoying this book, and it's not quite over, which is a part of the reason why I didn't make my top 10. I think there's 2 issues left at the time of recording. I don't remember exactly how many we got left, but it's coming to a close. Maybe it'll be in my my top 10 when it's all said and done next year. But really enjoying it. Corey, what's your next one?
My next one is Peacemaker Tries Hard by Kyle Starks and Steve Pugh. If you guys haven't heard about Kyle Starks, he is one of my favorite comic book writers. I feel like a book that probably comes up once or twice every couple of months is Sex Castle, where it's a parody upon every 80s, 90s action movie. A lot of fun, Kill Them All. He has a really good run of books. I think he even had a pretty solid run of Rick and Morty that I never read, but I heard it's well received. Peacemaker Tryhards is honestly it feels like an extra episode to the HBO show,
which is coming back.
It is coming back. I don't have much more of a pitch of it besides that. If you like the TV show, you'll like this book. I thought Kyle did a really good job of writing it. I thought Steve did a really good job of doing the art that really matched up well with the HBO show. I think it's just that's pretty much my pitch. If you like the Peacemaker TV show, I think you would like this a lot.
I haven't read this one. I'll have to check it out.
Yeah, no. At one point, Peacemaker fights a bunch of Deathstroke babies. So that's...
You said what?
He fights a bunch of Deathstroke babies.
No, I heard the words you said.
Yeah.
What do they mean next to each other?
They made...
I understand each word individually. I would like to know what they mean when you said them all in a row.
There was a bunch of clones of Slade
Deathstroke.
Wilson, of Deathstroke, as babies, and the
babies.
babies attack Peacemaker.
It's funny. You've explained it. I actually understand less now. Whatever.
Yeah.
My final honorable mention before we get to the to the beat of the episode is shout out to Dark Spaces, which the first Dark Spaces Wildfire, was one of my favorite books of last year. I've actually gone back to revisit a few times, and it really holds up. I love what that book is doing a lot. One of my favorite Scott Snyder books in a while. Just like a great condensed story of thrill, like a thriller and a kind of a action and horror and really a touching character study all wrapped into one. And then when I heard Dark Space was coming back as an anthology, I was excited because I thought it was going to be more of Scott Snyder on it. But there's been 2 this year, Hollywood Special with two different creative teams, Hollywood Special by Jeremy Lambert and Good Deeds by Che Grayson. And while I still think haven't reached the highs of Wildfire, which, like I said, really one of my favorite books of last year, I'm really enjoying this anthology, and they're basically like thematically connected more than anything else, and the art is really excellent in both these books. Kelly, I'm blanking on the name of the art. I'm blanking on the name of the artist who does Good Deeds, which is Kelsey Ramsey. Is the artist, and I really like the writing. I hope this. Honestly, I just think this book could continue in perpetuity. Scott Snyder keep finding interesting creative, because I don't know if you know these people, Che Grayson or Jeremy Lambert.
I'm not super familiar with them.
I never heard them before, and they introduced me to some new creators. I picked up a Che Grayson book, and I picked it up. I haven't started reading it yet, but I will, because I like the writing on this book. So
guys, we've had to read like 30 comic books for this. It's been my eyes fucking hurt.
But I do listen. No matter how many comic books I read, I'm always looking for good new creators. And if this is I think this is a really cool idea, because one, it seems like Snyder probably has some creative input on it. His name is still attached to it. It's like presented by Scott Snyder, and like I said, it's thematically connected. They're telling like very similar types of stories. And if he's going around finding interesting, pretty undiscovered comic book artists and authors to create this book and over and over again, I'll keep reading it. Like, I think this is a really cool idea. So I think the trade for Good Deeds drops early 2024. So if you guys are on the lookout for that book, go pick it up.
And last up, I won't spend a lot more time on this, but Rogue Sun, another, I mean, we try not to mention this, but it's under Image's comic book superhero line called the Massive Verse, where I think the premiere...
Despite its stupid name, actually, there's a lot of really good books.
A lot of really good books. Radiant Black, I think, is their flagship book for this, but Radiant Black, no one we mentioned.
Pink.
Radiant Pink. Don't forget about Radiant Red. I'm not kidding. These are all actual... these are other books. But Rogue Sun tells it to... So Rogue Sun is a superhero in New Orleans, and he gets killed. A week later, his son is bequeathed the new title and becomes Rogue Sun. But in this situation, the son is actually estranged from the father, so they have a horrible relationship and have not talked, and he's been raised by a single mother. And his father, before this, has 2 kids in a new marriage and lives in a mansion up on the hill. So the first arc of the book is him trying to solve the murder of his father, and also his father is a ghost that inhabits the superpowers that Rogue Sun is. So it's kind of him talking to the ghost of his dad while he's trying to solve his dad's murder. And also, if you don't get it, like Rogue Sun is also like spelled S-U-N, but he's a son. And he's also just kind of a dickhead the entire time. So it's also a superhero's just kind of a dickhead most of the time. So
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to laugh. I just love listening
to it's stupid
books that he likes, because he makes them sound like they're fucking the dumbest thing ever. And I've read Rogue Sun. Everything you said is true. When you list it all out, it sounds psychotic.
Well, it's not my fault. This is what the book's about.
Oh, it's so funny. Yeah, I really like all the stuff under this what's it called?
It's like it's
Hugeverse.
Massive Verse. It's like, I think it's fun to have like a superhero story where like the main character starts off super unlikable. Yeah. Like he's just like a bully, and then he just has these powers, and it's kind of him becoming a good person, like reconnecting with his dickhead of a dad and also like discovering this new family that he didn't know he had.
It's the classic story of like responsibility breeds change, and you're like,
Yeah.
it's like, I mean, obviously the prime example of this in our popular culture is Iron Man, who's like a warmonger when the first movie starts, and
I mean, I'm not trying to give too much of a
sacrifices himself to save the humanities. Yeah.
I don't want to give too much of a spoiler about it, but I think it was a really good job of setting the tone of what this book kind of is. Where the main character is asking his dad why did he pick him and not his two other kids that he clearly liked better. And his dad responds, well, he says, like, I wanted you to have this, blah, blah, blah. But after a second, he's like, why did you actually want me to have it? He's like, oh, I don't like you as much as those two, so I don't feel as bad as giving this to you. Which just like, I think at that moment, I'm like, oh, this is what this book's going to be. I really like this, where it's just a bunch of really shitty people who have superpowers. Well, one superpower, but yeah. But it's written by Ryan Parrott and a new artist called Abel. I'm not super familiar with either of their work, but I really recommend Rogue Sun. I think it's into its 15th or 16th issue now, but the first volume by itself is really good. But yeah, Jay, shall we take a quick break before we actually get into the episode?
Yeah, let's do it, and then we'll talk about our top tens.
It is an immovable fact that I killed Harlan.
Yes, you did. Yes, he did. Yes, you are. But I spoke in the car about the hole at the center of this donut. And what you and Harlan did that fateful night seems at first glance to fill that hole perfectly. A donut hole in a donut's hole. But we must look a little closer. And when we do, we see the donut hole has a hole in its center. It is not a donut hole, but a smaller donut with its own hole. And our donut is not a hole at all.
Unc, look, I understand that this is amusing for you.
Why was I hard? Why would someone harm me?
Someone fishing for a crime to reverse the will, Unc.
But
Come
I
on.
was hard before the sealed will was read. So yes, the person must have known the contents of the will. But one step further, that same person must have known a crime was committed. And further, if the intent was to reverse Marta's inheritance, they must have known that Marta was responsible.
And we're back.
So,
All right, it's time. It's time for the top tens. The 20 or so. We got some overlap, but the 10 best comic books by our estimations. Corey, you wanna run first?
sure. And I realized right now I should have just Googled this guy's name in the break, and I did not do that. But my number 10 is Image Comics'
Hold on,
The Sacrificers.
I got it. The Sacrificers by Rick Remender and Max Fumarare.
Thank you.
I did it.
What kind of feels like a...
Stuck the landing.
Thank you, Che. It feels kind of like a sequel. This book's 5 issues deep. It feels like a little bit of a sequel to Seven to Eternity, where it tells the tale. So the book itself is not something that we really have an idea of as an audience of where it's going. So it's a bit hard to describe, but from what it seems to be, it is a children, 5 different children from different families are gathered to go to some location to be sacrificed. But it's like seems to be kind of like entwined with these weird political systems of these very cool looking and magical families in order to keep harmony across the land. Not much is really known about it yet. It feels very like the first story arc is ending in the next issue. And I feel like for most of my list, I wanted to be very much like, this is the first arc, this is done. I just kind of wanted to put this here because I think it's going to have a lot of promise. I'm loving the first 5 issues. I know issue 6, I think it comes out next week. That'll be the end of this first arc. So I'm hoping that this book continues to be as good as it grabbed me. And I'm excited to see where it goes at the very end of it. So a year from now when we do this next year's episode, I'm wondering if it's going to make it onto that list, because where it is right now, I think it could be in that place.
The like you said already, the art is really, really beautiful.
Yeah, the art's really good, and I trust Rick Remender. He's really hasn't steered me wrong as a creator yet.
One of the few guys who's who goes back to the fantasy comic book realm, which I think is for me is so hit or miss, and it feels like in recent years more miss than anything. And he is consistent. Like you mentioned, Seven to Eternity is probably still one of my favorite fantasy comic books that we've read in recent years. And I like he's a really steady hand, and I understands the genre well, and it also helps that he seems to team up with amazing artists who can like render these sort of like worlds that defy imagination. We've always said that Seven to Eternity is adaptable. Like I don't see any way you could put that onto screen in a way.
No, you can't. It doesn't work.
Not this decade at least. So yeah, I'm a big fan of his.
Yeah, and I think the way that he does world building is so cool too, where he doesn't he just shows you a bunch of stuff and then like injects dialogue that like belays information, but he never really explains what's happening, why we're happening. I don't really say this is not as out there as a David Lynch project, but he does mention him in the end of his first issue. And I kind of can see the whole, like, I don't know where we're going. I'm just going to trust the artist and let it ride kind of vibe. And I'm excited to just, like, let him go, like, let him be free with this, which is what I do with Seven to Eternity. And it's one of my favorite books.
Yeah. Agreed.
Jay, what you got?
My number 10 is a book we talked about earlier in the year, the Paul Dano, and yes, that Paul Dano, Riddler Year One. Corey and I were talking about this a bit before we started recording. It's possible. I mean, I really love this book. I thought this book was excellent, obviously. But it's possible I'm grading this on a curve because I sort of expected very little because we've had a number of actors and a few screenwriters or novelists try their hand at comic books, and I think it oftentimes, especially with the actors, doesn't go super well. And I thought this was just a really well-made, well-written comic book by Dano, but also a really interesting examination of this character and getting to see what I think is like his inner workings of how, because basically this book it's like a prequel to the Batman movie, his Batman movie that he plays the Riddler in. And he's basically writing the origin story of this character. And you get to see sort of the workings of how he formed the character in his mind. And as I said at the time of when we talked about that Batman episode, Paul Dano, his representation of that character on screen is probably my favorite ever. And to get to see how he pieced this character together and all these things he had bouncing around his head is a thing that would never have gotten to see for another. I don't think you've ever gotten to see this for an actor. There's sometimes you get interviews where they talk about their process, but this is such an in-depth 6-issue exploration of this character that literally leads up to basically the last page is kind of like days or hours or moments. Like it's hard to tell the timeline, but it's basically when the movie starts. So we just lead up into the movie, and when I finished reading, I kind of wanted to just like start watching the movie again, but I didn't have time, unfortunately. But I really love this. It feels just like a unique experience. I wish we could get more people who have like. I mean, if we ever get like Barry Keogh's Riddler or Joker, I would devour a Barry Keogh Joker book. I don't think he would ever do that, but
I just think it's very funny that we have two like actors who have played characters this year, superheroes this year, superhero characters this year, and they've been the most tonally different books ever. Where we have Paul Dano's Riddler Year One and Aman Vellani's Miss Marvel, which is just a fun, good time. Wrote it.
Yeah.
And also, she did a really good job about that as well. It's just very different.
Books. It's clear that the things that they both share, the way that Vellani talks about her time in the MCU and playing that character and like just like the joy she has for Marvel is very similar, obviously like you said, tonally very different, to Paul Dano's joy and obsession with his character in the DC universe. I think you need somebody who's like really invested in not just the films they're making, but the universe they're entering, and that's probably pretty rare. I mean, it was J.J. Abrams who like wrote the worst book we ever read about Spider-Man.
It was like I mean, as much as I was dunking on Amazing Spider-Man, like that actually was like it seemed like they just like forgot how to write.
Yeah.
I mean, I think it's mostly just his name with his son doing it. But is it like the worst piece of art, Nepo Baby adjacent?
It's got to be up there. Neither of us have seen Earwig and the Witch or whatever the Miyazaki Sons movie is.
Oh, that's what he did. Okay, yes, but no, I implore you to avoid. I think it was just called Spider-Man or whatever the fuck it was.
Yeah. Or was that Spider-Men? Was that the Spider-Men book?
No, Spider-Man was Bendis.
Oh, right. Okay. Yeah.
And that's actually a fun book.
Yeah.
So that's
different. Miles and Peter Parker.
Miles and Peter, right, when they first meet. Yeah.
No, but
this one was like it was like Spider-Man's kid after Spider-Man got like murdered, and then Mary Jane was like kid. I don't remember. It was fucking weird though.
Yeah, I didn't even read. I think I read 2 issues, but all this is to say, clearly Paul Dano has like a love and respect for this character that I found surprising and rewarding as a reader. And I think that's a lot of why the Riddler Year One really works.
Yeah.
Corey, what's your
I
number
was
one?
surprised. I feel like I just have, I mean, I always feel like I have a bit of like, oh, this is going to be a little eye rolling, but I'm happy that you pushed me to read this one. I really did enjoy Riddler Year One.
I'm also, as people know, I'm a sucker for like mini series in the Batman universe because I think it's still. We got one coming up later. I think they still produce the best of comic books in the big two. Why that is exactly? Is it a factor of what Batman is, or a factor of what the writers are, or what? Who knows? But I still just think though that's probably the best bang for your buck. Of the big two writers is grabbing a mini series from inside the Batman universe.
I mean, we kind of don't really have a lot on it this year, but DC's is it Black Imprint? I can't remember what it is. But Black Label Imprint is like pretty much been putting out solid work like consistently, and not just all the Tom King stuff.
Yeah.
Weirdly, all right. My number 9 book is Black Cloak, written by Kelly Thompson and art by Meredith McLaren. Not intentional. Black Cloak. We talked about Black Cloak a long time ago, but it's a murder mystery story following 2 detectives in this fantasy kingdom where I think elves are the high class and like humans and fairies live in the middle. But that kind of vibe where it's like a future fantasy universe as like people are trying to solve a crime of a dead prince. Don't want to give too much away from it because I think the murder and the mystery are really, really well done, and it's a really solid and dense 5-issue run. And I think Meredith's art is so good in it. We're keeping like the tone. It can be serious when it needs to be serious, but it can be like fun when it wants to be fun. And I think she also just throws in some amazing like splash pages when she can. I've seen no word on where it goes from this. It does leave itself on a pretty big cliffhanger for Volume 1. I looked it up during the break to see if she was making anything more, any announcements, and I think it's been kind of radio silence.
She's been quite prolific in recent years. Kelly Thompson, one of the hardest working writers we have right now, so I wouldn't be surprised.
And I've heard good things. Oh yeah, I mean I've heard good things about her Birds of Prey run that's currently running, and I've been meaning to get to that. So that probably would have made my list, but I really recommend Black Cloak because I feel like people haven't been talking about it this much this year. I think my only note of the book is I did find it hard to follow from page to page at some points. It wasn't bad enough for me to knock it out of my top 10. It just probably would have gotten a couple more points up if I felt like the story was a bit more coherent at certain points. But I don't mean to make this sound like a knock. The story is very well told, and it's not hard to follow. I just kind of wish there was a little bit more finessing overall.
She's doing a lot in that book. Is like building a world, telling a mystery, introducing you to tons of characters in like an entirely new language, basically not like Elvish, but like an entirely new set of vocabulary to understand this world.
Yeah,
it's a big undertaking.
It's like definitely a lot to do. A lot of similarities I can find with this and Far Sector. But with Far Sector, great book by N.K. Jemisin for DC Comics. But I feel like she had a lot more time to work with, like 12 issues different than the 6 issues that Kelly wanted to tell this mystery part in, because it's very clear that the mystery of what just happened is now going to lead into the bigger part of the story that I think she wanted to get a bit more into. But a lot of good metaphors in it, a lot of like really well done, fun world. I really recommend it. I love the art in the book too. It's like might be my favorite. First, specifically as someone who likes that kind of flat drawing style, I think it might be my like favorite of the year. Jay, what you got for number 9?
Next up for me, number 9 is Totem by Laura Perez. This is a book about life and death and mourning and the afterlife, and it's just speaking of like incredible flat art, the art style here really, it's one of the few books that I've read that is like I would like stare at the pages and it's pretty sparse dialogue in a lot of times, so I would just like be peeking in every corner of all the art. I think the art is beautiful, and the story is really melancholy, and the ending leaves you really wanting. This is one of the few books this year that I read like multiple times because I just wanted to I wanted to really absorb Perez's the world and the story she's telling, and it is a story that I think really intentionally is the audience asking questions, which longtime listeners will know I'm a big fan of open-ended endings because I think they let you the reader and me specifically just explore all the ideas in perpetuity, and it's obviously I like a good ending too, but I think if you have a story like this which has a really satisfying, it's such a weird sentence to say, a satisfying open conclusion, you can really it could stick with you a lot longer than something that's just like a great end to a good mystery. It's like, oh, that was fun, but then maybe you don't think about it so much. I've been thinking about Totem a lot since I read it, and part of it is because the art is incredible, and part of it is just I think the story really lends itself to repeat readings, and it's a really quick read. It's a big book. I got it on Kindle. I'm actually I ordered the hard copy because I wanted to actually have the physical version of it as well. But yeah, I really liked it. I highly recommend, like I said, a quick read. I think I'm just double checking, but I'm 99% sure she does everything. Story, art, and color. So shout out to Laura Perez. Actually, not shout out to Laura Perez. Fuck you for being so talented. How about that?
Yeah. Assholes. Speaking of a way too talented author, Immortal Thor, written by Al Ewing and Martin Coccolo. I mean, I did mention how much I liked Meredith McLaren's flat art, but what Martin Coccolo brings to Immortal Thor is like these almost painting-like views and amazing fight scenes, and I don't really think I've seen like an actual just in a month-to-month comic before.
Well, listen, when
the
you
story
get
that
covers
Ewing,
by our boy, you got to go hard on the interiors.
It's Alex Ross is doing amazing covers week to week. The series, like, it has like this gravitas to it that makes it feel like it's going to be super important, and Al's like writing on it just like it feels so like back to the whole Norse mythology roots of the character, and like kind of just the way that he includes some like Storm shows up in an issue, and then we kind of like it's like you kind of get a little bit of everything Thor related. And if he's anything like that Immortal Hulk run, which just kind of grabs everything and anything it can from like the long history of Hulk, I hope he can do more of that here, because it's grabbing not only from like the Marvel Thor's history, but also from like the actual things of legend, leading to some amazing fight scenes. And I think it ended the first arc recently, and I was just like left in such like a place of like, yo, what the fuck just happened? It concluded, but then you're like, oh no, the sense of dread is continuing into what's going to like clearly be more and more of the book. I hope that this run keeps going for a really long time. I would love it for this to be like the Thor run that Immortal Hulk has become. Just because, I mean, so far it's going so well. And speaking of Al, he's also been doing X-Men Red, which was almost in my top 10. I think it's the second best. I think it actually might have just ended, but it's been the second best X-Men run, which has mostly been following Storm's path while she leads a whole new. Basically, she becomes queen of like another mutantdom out on Mars, and it's kind of dealing with like basically some Game of Thrones type shit in like space, with Storm being the main character, and it's really fucking been a great run. He's still like might be hands down my current favorite Marvel writer, just because of his consistency of the work he puts out, and like his ability just to work with other people. And then I'm going to mention another author later on that he's been working on different things with, but it's so clear that his ideas are so infectious that you kind of can see his mark left along in different books. And I wonder like why Marvel hasn't like really pushed for him to be like their next big like captain of something, but I'm assuming he kind of is much more okay with kind of telling his stories where he can tell them and setting up his own stuff. But his is like him and Kieran Gillen are the two things about Marvel where I'm constantly like, oh, you guys are actually working on something very, very cool. But yeah, Immortal Thor has been great. I really recommend it. And once that's been read is fully collected, I recommend that too. But that's a bit more of a hard jump in, I think, than Immortal Thor. You gotta know a lot of shit that's happening for an X-Men Red.
Gotta read about 4,000 different X-Men runs.
It's hard, but someone's gotta do it. It's me. My brain's so fucking broken.
To is an interesting word, but okay.
It's so rewarding once you get to that point of being like, I understand everything. And it's so rewarding. And that like one moment, and then a week later, you're like, what the fuck is going on? But
Corey
that
reading
peak of
X-Men,
happiness.
like the fucking Hangover gift, the fucking numbers flying around his head.
It's like genuinely funny how many like 100 to 200 episode deep podcasts there are out there that just talk about the X-Men. I'm like, oh, this series is bad shit. And I think I understand comics. I don't know anything.
It's too much for me. I'll admit it. It's too much.
It's okay.
I like
it's okay.
I like the X-Men. I'm just like, every week when I see there's like 3 new X-Men books in 3 different story arcs, I'm just like, I'm sorry, I can't do it.
I think it's kind of become like its own like sci-fi story, basically. It's like, even though it's in the Marvel universe and now it's like crossing over a bit more, it definitely does feel like a long-running sci-fi series at this point, rather than like a superhero comic. I guess they kind of have moved past being a superhero comic, I guess, with their current run, in a good way, though. Shay, talk about number 8, because I want to talk about number 8 with you.
My number 8 is Jeff Lemire's Little Monsters. The Jeff Lemire and Dustin Nguyen, the team that brought you Ascenders and Descenders, return to bring you another story of children trapped in the endless void that is time and space, basically. I loved this book because we knew from the start it was like gonna be pretty heavy read. I think just like it's a bleak story, and I think the stakes get upped even more and more, and you realize that there's actually this is a story of endless time, and it's really brutal. I mean, the end is like quite tough at points.
Yeah,
you see. Really, you watch the end of humanity in a lot of ways. I don't know. I just really loved it. I think the art is really sick. The choice to go black and white with just like a few splashes of red for blood, and I think that first issue and the last issue were some of the best issues of comics I read in the last years. I think the first issue came out not this year. The first issue was like
I think
mid last year or like late 2 years ago.
Yeah, I think so. I can't remember, but this is where a majority of it wrapped up this year. But
I really loved what Lemire was doing here, where he I'm again going to reference Saltburn, where Lemire seems to have a lot of trust for his audience in the way that Fennel didn't, and that really annoys me. The thing that annoys me most from artists is when they don't believe you have any reading or viewing comprehension, and he just like doesn't. That first issue where he doesn't say these are vampires, they can't go out in the daylight, and he just trusts you'll piece it together. And over the course of the book, where you sort of like, there's so many questions you're asking, and they're answered in the margins and the backgrounds, and you just have to piece things together. Like we kept trying to ask, like, how long has these kids been here? And then it turns out fucking centuries of time. It's crazy.
It's a story that really feels like so. It's like, I love it though. I love it too because it's a story that feels so like contained in what ends up being like 3 or 4 days, but the way that he like tells story, all the implications and parts that go into it are years upon years upon years of like story that he's kind of just like condensing in a really, really well done way.
I think it's a little bit of a cheat code to be like, here are these kids that are actually hundreds of years old and will also live forever in this torment.
But they also
being a vampire.
But also, it does a good thing where the kids aren't like. It's like, because I feel like with those kind of things, you have two directions where these kids are like actually adults and they act like adults, but they're in kids' bodies. But these like actually do feel like children who have just been trapped. Yeah, because
they've never. It's just them. It's these kids. They never had to grow up, so they don't grow up, and they don't think. I think also Lemire is playing with the idea that you just can't. If you don't want to grow up, you can't. You don't have to. I really liked it. It's it's another one of like Lemire's, again, like people know, one of our favorite writers on this podcast. I wanted to talk about Bone Orchard, but I don't know what's going on still. It's the classic Lemire experience where I'm
none of the bone orchards have been bad. I just can't describe what the fuck they are.
This is what I said about Gideon Falls for like 2 years, where I was like, I don't fucking know what's happening, but I'm loving it. And then when it all wrapped up, I was like, well, that was amazing. Let's do it again. Let's run it all back, Lemire.
I really did like 10,000 Black Feathers. I don't really know if that wrapped this year or last year. And I've kind of been waiting for Tenement to end.
Last year it wrapped because I think this year has just been Tenement.
And Tenement's on issue 7 of 10. So I'm kind of letting that one breathe until I can actually get to that and read that along. But that's the reason I haven't included Bone Orchard because, I mean, I knew we were going to talk about Little Monsters a bit. And also, it's hard to sell Bone Orchard. Besides, it's just a scary book that stays with you. But Jeff Lemire is still one of my favorite working comic book writers. Yeah, really like Little Monsters, though. I'm really happy to see this on your list.
Yeah. What's your number 7, Corey?
Our number 7 is from our most recent book club, Do a Powerbomb by Daniel Warren Johnson. I mean, I don't want to say more about this because you guys should go definitely listen to our book club episode.
Quite a bit. All right.
Really good book. A book that I wanted to include in this list, but it's only 3 issues or 3 to 4
I
issues.
saw it
deep,
on a number of people's lists though, which is crazy. I can't do 3 issues of a comic book in a year. Is like it's not enough, but I listen.
It's not enough, but it's really good so far. And that's his run on Transformers, which is brutal, humanistic, and just a shit ton of fun. I don't really think it's just like it's Transformers, but like good. And in like the 3rd or 4th issue, Optimus Prime rips his arm off and beats a robot to death with it. So if that's not a pitch for you to read Transformers, you should. I mean, it's like basically what would be like rated R Transformers without like it's not grotesque and in your face like it because Daniel Warren Johnson actually has a really good way to portray this kind of shit. But Transformers is really, really solid too. But do our power bombs collected in a volume, listen to our episode and hear more about it. But it's very good and deserves a purchase.
Yeah, like we said, we talked about it on the podcast. Quite a good book. You guys check it out. I will jump into my number 7, which we've also talked about quite a bit. We closed out. We did an episode when this book closed out a few months ago, and this is Tom King's Gotham City Year 1. And like I said, we talked about it a lot. This book is just it is a really excellent exploration of a story that I didn't think I even really needed. It never crossed my mind. I was like, how did Gotham get the way it did? But
like, why is it such shit?
Right, but then when you see a story about it, which I actually kind of wish the story had been even longer. It's only 6 issues? 6 issues, yeah. I would have loved to spend more time with the corrupt cops and evil politicians, and just watching this city fall into decay. But I mean, listen, King is an all timer for us. There's a couple of the books that like I think were too short. We're just talking about Transformers. Wonder Woman issue 1's probably my favorite single issue of a comic book I read this year, but we're only 3 or 4 issues in it at the time of recording, so I didn't feel like that.
And even though the book is following a kind of trend of each issue being its own like story for sure, and I think each issue has been like just like straight up gut punches after gut punches. I mean, really the most recent one with the child who has cancer and she's like doing pretty much a Make-A-Wish trip with him while being like it's been so solid. It's been I wanted to include this book, but as Chase said, it's like still not at the point yet where I feel like
we'll certainly be talking about it. Don't worry.
Yes,
and the other one was Human Target, which was my number 1 from last year, but only had I want to say 4 or so issues to close out the run though. So it did conclude this year, but since I already talked about it last year and there's only a few this year, I mean, it's really excellent. If you guys are looking for a great, like pretty fun, I think noir, like a noir, superhero story.
It's a solid noir film of like who killed me, but like the guest characters are superheroes.
Smallwood's art is unparalleled. Oof. But Corey, your number 6 we just talked about was Gotham Year 1.
Gotham Year 1.
So I'll jump over to my number 6, and that is Damn Them All by Simon Spurrier, which I've been trying to think about how to pitch this to Corey because you haven't actually read you've been thinking about reading it but hadn't read it yet.
It was literally on my list of what I'm reading next before we started this one, but I just didn't have the time to get to it.
There's too many.
My brain is broken.
But I figured out the elevator pitch for this book.
Okay.
And Damn Them All is Jonathan Strange and Mr. Norrell meets Guy Ritchie. And I think that's what I love about it.
Wait, you mean Doctor Strange?
No, Jonathan Strange and Mr. Oh, okay, not a great reference then. It's Harry Potter meets Guy Ritchie. How about that?
Okay, all right.
It's basically, I mean, it's hard for me to say like this is the kind of thing I love because it feels like it's not like a genre that comes around a lot. But I really like genre fare like fantasy or sci-fi, and then told through the lens of like lowbrow, not lowbrow's not the right word, but lowbrow crime fiction. And this is it's got real, Simon Spurrier's dialogue is really fun. He's got a real grasp of the like, I think these are Liverpudlians, but UK criminal scum basically. And he's got he's got the Guy Ritchie patter down well. Not that Guy Ritchie invented English people speaking to each other. And
so it's kind of like Constantine.
It's very, I mean, I think even the synopsis is like, this is kind of like Constantine, but it's self-contained, which is really good. And I really like the protagonist. She's just like she's a real badass, and Spurrier writes her really well. And I think this book is just really fun, and it was one of those things I picked up just sort of on a whim because it was like, oh, it's got good reviews. The title and synopsis didn't super grab my attention. I was like, oh, another magic fantasy book. And I implore anybody to read that first issue and not get immediately hooked. It's just really excellent dialogue. That first issue just has like some of the most fun. It's like a crime book. It's a really fun crime book, and then suddenly a demon comes out of a coin. You're like, wow, okay,
hell yeah,
sick.
Okay,
yeah,
awesome.
It's really fun.
That's all I need to know.
Shout out to Charlie Adlard and Sophie Dodgson, who do the art and color on this book, which is also I think really excellent. I love and I don't know. I guess the artist is the one who's in charge of like. Paneling, but the paneling is really cool in this book. And so it feels like a weird thing to say, but the way they use because there's a lot of narration, which normally I don't like, but it works in this because I think it's very much going for the Guy Ritchie stick. But the way they do the narration, like in between panels and around dialogue, and they use an interesting text effect for whispering and stuff. There's a lot of cool stuff in this book that just. A lot of attention to detail, I think, really adds to why this is really successful. 11 issues as of time of recording. I think all within about a year, which is also nice. I like that Simon Spurrier writes fucking comic books and puts them out. It doesn't take 4 months to release every issue, which is really nice.
Is the series over or is it still going? The idea sounds really, really good though. I mean, it's like you basically it's gonna be Constantine.
So it ends with this last issue. Yeah, okay.
Oh, okay, cool.
Or at least this run. I think it's been really successful. I would not be surprised if after issue 12 they come back for more.
Well, I'm definitely gonna keep an eye out for that. I'm probably gonna end up reading the entire series over the weekend.
Yeah, and I mean, annoyingly, this comes out like the final issue of this run comes out like January 17th. But I'm okay making the call that this book is really good even without the final issue. It's okay. It's fine with me. We got most of it done. Corey,
I'm sure the ending will be sticked.
Yeah, I don't know if have we actually talked about a Spurrier book on the podcast before. I think we've read his stuff before.
Yeah, we've gotten close to it. I think he had another book that was also this year that was like I almost got to it, but I've been a big fan of the guy. But I don't think we've ever had a chance to actually talk about his stuff. I mean, he had a really good Constantine run. I have not got a chance to.
Is pretty similar to this. If you like the Hellblazer book, I think you could easily dive into to Damn Them All pretty easily, or even honestly, you know what it is? It's kind of like Hellblazer meets The Dreaming, his Sandman book. It's certainly more like. I think more invested in the magical world than Hellblazer is, much like The Dreaming was. But yeah, I think I've liked a lot of his Spurrier stuff. I'm looking through. I don't know if we ever actually talked about anything. Code I know is a big success, but I've never actually read it.
I mean, he wrote a book called Six Gun Gorilla. We got to look into this, Jay.
Yeah. You want to end the podcast now and talk about then read that?
Let's talk about Lost in a lawless post-apocalyptic other world. Good thing your companion is a six-gun gorilla. Oh my god, this is the greatest.
Wait, so does the gorilla have 6 guns, or is it like a 6 It's like a revolver.
I think it's a revolver.
Okay.
It's a revolver.
Like, honestly.
Don't worry. It's not too crazy, Che. But let's take a quick break and come back with our final 5.
Let's do it.
You want to know how I got these scars? My father was a drinker and a fiend. And one night, he goes off crazier than usual. Mommy gets the kitchen knife to defend herself. He doesn't like that. Not one bit. So, me watching, he takes the knife to her, laughing while he does it. He turns to me and he says, "Why so serious?" He comes at me with the knife. "Why so serious?" He sticks the blade in my mouth. Let's put a smile on that face.
And we're back.
Sup?
All right, it's time to talk about our top 5s, the 5 best comic books of 2023. First up, Corey, your number 5.
Sure. My number 5 is Immortal X-Men, written by Kieran Gillen and Lucas Werneck. I think the series just concluded last month. But I was mentioning earlier, like, I think there's 2 really solid X-Men books to read this year. This is kind of, like, I mentioned this earlier, but it's very much like more of a political book than anything else. Mm-hmm. Kind of more discussing the inner workings of the mutant nation of Krakoa. That's kind of been like the Marvel X-Men main run of recent years. But it's a lot of, like, just like the big names of X-Men kind of just doing a bunch of political backstabbings and kind of seeing, like, how that plays out. I think towards the end of the run, each issue was its own character dissection from the different members of what, like, the Quiet Council, which is basically Congress for X-Men. But yeah, it's been a really solid run. I think Kieran has done a really good job of expanding the X-Men universe, keeping really well written, and a really just all the way through very rare, like, perfect run on a big 2 comics. Lucas Werneck has really great art too, and I love all the covers on it. It's as Che mentioned earlier, X-Men is a very hard thing to get into. Very hard thing to get into. And I think after this era of X-Men is done, like, next year, I think this will be one of the books that shines on its own for years to come. If you're still caught up with X-Men, really recommend it. And if you're not, I think you probably can figure it out if you put in the effort. Not that hard. I think you'll be okay.
Just make sure you have Google open while you're reading it.
Exactly. That's all you fucking need. Just need some Google. This is fine. You're not going to be that lost.
Not going to be that lost. I love it. My number 5 is Roaming by Jillian and Mariko Tamaki. And if Damn Them All was, like, kind of made for me in a lab, I think this book couldn't be less up my alley, and I was just not going to read it, but it got such high praise, I thought might as well check it out. It's basically the story of 3 teenage girls going to three teenage Canadian girls traveling to New York on vacation in, I think, like 2009, 2011, something like that. But during the smartphone era, but very early on, which is important to this book. And it is, it's just about their experience and their friendship and their really, like, falling out and coming back together. And it's about 3 friends who are, like, it's about 2 main friends who are distanced from each other because they were friends in high school and have since gone to college in different places and are trying to maintain a friendship over this, like, really challenging time, which we all, if you've been to college or really moved away from your home at any point, you know how difficult that can be. And it's a really beautifully written story. I don't have a digital version, so I'm just going to hold this book up randomly to the camera, which is awkward, but whatever, so be it. It's a really beautiful story about these characters that Tamakis have, like, a real deep understanding for. It feels really personal in a way that none of the other books on my list really do. And I loved how real and human the dialogue and the story is, and it's so, I mean, off the back of Damn Them All, which is about demons coming to like basically destroy the earth and trying to save humanity, for a story to have such small stakes and also feel so so grand, is I think really impressive. It reminds me, certainly less dark. This book is not, I don't want to suggest that it's like got tonally the same, but it reminded me a lot of the movie from a few years ago, Never, Rarely, Sometimes, Always, the movie about a girl having to travel across state lines to get an abortion. And like this, it was just like this really quiet personal examination of her experience. And Roaming has that same sort of scratches that same sort of itch, rather than it's like the same, tonally the same thing at all, really. But from Drawn and Quarterly, art is really beautiful. Pretty quick read also. Like it's a thick book, but it's like I said, it's a lot of it's just like it's a pretty breezy read. I really like this book. If you're looking for really I was gonna say a gift for like young comic book readers, but obviously I'm not a young comic book reader, and I really loved it. So I think this is a book for really anybody. Definitely worth checking out. Corey, what's your you did not read Roaming, right? I know.
I did not, but I'm a big fan of Mariko, so I'm excited. I'm gonna take a look for it after this, actually.
Yeah, we've talked about, I think, one or two Mariko Tamaki books. We've read a few. I don't think I've ever seen Gillian Tamaki's work before, or at least if I have, I am not familiar with it. I think
the top of my head, I'm not super familiar with it, but I'm excited to actually get that one. Excited to get that one to read. It'll be sure. All right, my number 4 is Monica by Daniel Clowes. I believe this is your number 3, Che, for this year.
Yeah, my number 3. We've both been struggling with where to put this book. I think for those of you who listen to our Patience episode, also basically Daniel Clowes' legendary book. I mean, probably if you've ever Googled best comic books of all time, it's been on that list. This is his really triumphant return to comic books, and I think both of us agree it is artistically daring and successful, and it's dense, and I found really rewarding when I finished reading it, but I don't know if either of us would say we enjoyed this book. Is that fair?
I think you hit the nail on the head right there. Like,
I think
where
it's
I
always
thought
tough
this
with lists like this.
Is
it what we like the best, or is it just what is the best?
Personally, it is what I like the best, while also acknowledging things are very good. And I think Monica does nothing wrong as a comic. And I think if anything, it tells a really interesting story. The art is fantastic, and the progression of it is really well done. Yeah. But I didn't really enjoy it. So it's not my number 1 because I think mostly because of that. But I think still really good though.
I think the thing I love about this book that I did genuinely enjoy is his fascination with time continues throughout Monica. I mean, that's so much about what Patience is literally a time travel book, but is also about like losing time, like about aging, and what we talked about this a lot. We talked about this a lot with all art.
Jake,
it's really
about you might actually explain what this book might be if people have not heard about it yet. So, I feel like this book you only would know about this book if you saw a listicle about best comics of this year.
Well, I think this was actually one of my most anticipated books. I mean, I'm a big fan of Clowes' work, and that I find him to be like obviously a pioneer of this art form. I was excited for it coming out, but so Monica basically is the story of a woman's life, Monica, from before her conception even to her death, her ego death, her absorption back into space and time. Is that what we want to call it?
Not a fan of that ending, honestly.
I think it's Clowes' take on a biographical tale, and that's basically a well-trodden type of story, basically the story of a woman from birth to death, but Clowes, who is, like I said, fascinated with time and space and manipulating that, starts the book before her death and ends it, I mean, kind of after. It's again, the ending is I don't want to spoil it, but is a little ambiguous and also a little strange. But that is the Clowes experience, really. I don't want people to think that we're like, because we're saying it, we didn't love it. It's not amazing art. Obviously, I think it's incredible. It's my number 3 book of the year. And Corey's, it's your number 4. We both think it's really excellent work. But I think it is the kind of book that I think you need to revisit it. It needs to sit with you for a while for you to really appreciate it. And both of us, I think, read this in the last month or so. I would like to revisit this and Patience, and I see the themes that they will share in his work. Really,
I think it's like one of those things where like it's very much like an art house experience when you come to like a film or something like that, where I think it did nothing wrong as a comic book. I think it's actually a really excellent comic book. It's number 4 of my favorite of the year. It's just one of those things where I think we definitely skew more of a personal opinion rather than we're not giving out fucking awards, all right? So get off our fucking case and give anything to talk about.
Yeah, I listen. I think there is something to challenging art, and this book is certainly challenging. And I'm with you, Corey, that I think the ending is a bit too ambiguous and maybe just too weird. But that's also kind of how I felt about Patience when I first read it. And then over time, I was like, I see the themes he's really playing with, and I do think it's quite brilliant. So maybe I'll feel that way about Monica in 3 months.
It's definitely kind of skewing the whole like idea between living like a mundane kind of like life versus kind of doing the whole like extreme or like kind of living like free and like kind of going back and forth between that and also dealing with like people who are parents and parents who aren't ready and dealing with that other bullshit too. So there are a lot of important and well thought out themes in the book as well.
Yeah.
What the fuck was the ending though?
Space time folding back on itself, I think, right?
Yeah, it was good. Just not my favorite. I don't fucking know. Trey, what's your next one? Things like this annoy me. I don't know why they annoy me, and it really shouldn't. But
I get it. No, I'm with you. Like I said, I enjoy a ambiguous ending that really challenges you and makes you. It really sticks with you. I think the ending of Totem, which is something I referenced before, is different to the ending of Monica for me, in that Totem, I think, was asking a lot of questions, while Monica made me ask a lot of questions, right?
Yeah.
And that might really be a failure on my part. And again, like I said, I do want to read this book again. It's actually, compared to Patience, I found like a much quicker read. It's pretty short in comparison. And actually, despite the fact that he is quite verbose at times, his dialogue, and I should have mentioned this, but I'm glad you sort of reminded me, his dialogue is actually incredibly punchy. Like I think he actually has a real grasp of how people talk to each other that a lot of comic writers and a lot of really good comic writers I don't think have. And Daniel Clowes really knows how to that opening vignette.
I would hate it if it,
great.
Yeah. I would hate if every comic book sounded like this, but I think it definitely does.
Oh, of course. But yeah, you can't. I mean, I feel the same way about everything I love. I wouldn't want every movie to be Poor Things. Like that'd be
great. Fucking imagine Oppenheimer equals Poor Things. Please give that to me.
I don't know if I would enjoy that actually.
Yes, you would. What's your number 4, Jay?
My number 4, The Boys Are Back in Town. My boys. Basically, these guys have like a permanent place on my top 10 list. And that is, of course, Ed Brubaker and Sean Phillips, specifically Night Fever, which, if you want to talk about endings that stuck with you, I mean, this book is, from start to finish, haunting. I put it on a rundown when it first came out, or pretty early in the year, February or something like that. And I thought it was like I think I just read the Image page wrong. And I was like, I thought it was the first issue of what was going to be like a new Ed Brubaker ongoing. So I sat down and I was like, this book is going to be like 20 pages. And I'm reading it digitally. And I just keep going, and eventually I'm like, this book's been going on for quite a while. Not realizing like it just sucked me in so much I didn't realize I'd read like an 80-page book thinking it was going to be over in 20 pages. And I think that is my review of Night Fever. Is it envelops you much like this guy's Night. It like takes you on a ride that you're not expecting and brings you to an ending that is both equal parts satisfying and unnerving. And I love Brubaker and Phillips. I really do.
It feels like a movie.
Yes.
And I think
a
like
movie
this
I
Night
would
Fever
love to watch.
Exactly. Night Fever feels like a movie. Like it doesn't take you more than an hour and a half to read it. It's a very clear, tight story that it doesn't have anything else to say afterwards. It doesn't need to continue. Like it leaves in a place where you're kind of like the ambiguity of it, I think is very well done. But yeah, I did like Night Fever a lot. And Jay was giving me shit for not having this on my list.
I wasn't giving you shit. I just asking. I just was asking.
Yeah.
I did also want to
contention
shout
in this
out. I
podcast.
mean, the boys also did where the body was, which could have easily made my top 10. Dropped earlier this last month in December. Also loved that, but I tried to limit myself to one Brubaker Phillips, or really one of everybody per year. And I thought that book was also really excellent. Corey, what's your number 3?
My number 3 is, in my opinion, the best superhero comic from the big two on stands right now.
It has been for like 3 years now. It's been so good.
Yeah, I think it's
for a while.
also been on my list. Batman Superman World's Finest by Mark Waid and Dan Mora, which started off with Dan Mora is maybe my favorite like comic book artist right now. He just kind of captures that mix between like old school style and the new age of how to draw superhero comics so well. And Mark Waid is like telling this like very fun, tongue-in-cheek, like kind of throwback with a modern flair to Batman and Superman, where the adventures just feel very nonsensical and silly and always tie together in really fun ways. I'm really liking that he's actually gone back to, and he's kind of revisiting his Kingdom Come story, which, I mean, one of the most famous comic books of all time.
Go check out that book club episode.
Yes, it was very good. But yeah, no, it seemed like Mark Waid's just kind of taking a look back at like Batman and Superman and what makes them really fun and just like exploring that. It's just all around a good time of a book. If you like check out the middle of the run where my favorite issue was like Robin and Supergirl go on a date and Robin shows up to the date in costume and just kind of like just seeing these two people just clash at each other while trying to go on a date is, you know, it's just like, well, that's like the fun thing about comic books when you kind of can explore stupid shit like that in between punching giant monsters in the face and looking for the Joker and shit.
Yeah,
but
I've been loving World's Finest for I think 3 years now. It came out
I think so
2021 or something. It reminds me a lot of Superman's pal Jimmy Olsen, where they're both like modern takes on classic comic book fare, and when done really well, it just reminds me why like this medium is undying. Is so because it's kind of perfection in a way, and I'm with you that Mark Waid is really tapped into something really great, and the art's sick. Yeah,
I think it's just like sometimes you just want a book to be super fun, and that's just what this is. It's just a fun time through and through.
Yeah.
The book's like, as Shay's been saying, like, I think it's on issue 21, 20, but like honestly, any volume that you pick on, I think he's done a really good job of keeping each volume contained so you don't get too lost. So if you see any of the collected versions out there, I'm pretty sure you'll be okay if you kind of just hop in wherever.
Yeah, I agree. All right, well, my number 3 was Monica by Daniel Clowes, so I'll just throw it right back over to you, Corey, for actually both our number 2s.
Our number 2 is Immortal Sergeant by Joe Kelly and Ken Nomura.
Another book we did a deep dive on when
we did do a deep dive in. But Immortal Sergeant is the tale of a father and son, where the father is a dickhead cop and the son is like a video game programmer, and exploring their relationships while the titular character is hunting down a criminal from his past.
Yeah. And I think as we talked about at the time, the thing I found most beautiful about this book is that really on its surface, it's quite simple. Like I said, this is a pretty classic story of like father and son repairing their relationship and like a cop chasing down a cold case. We've seen that a million times. We've seen those individually a million times. I don't know how many times they've been combined into one, but I'm sure at least once. But the thing that is really great about this story is that Joe Kelly and Ken Nomura clearly have a lot of themes that are really buried deep within, and the more you unpack it, the more interesting it is. And for a book that seems really like about like pretty boilerplate on the surface, I think is written really expertly. The dialogue is so good. Yeah. I mean, really funny at times and really heartfelt at times.
And unfortunately, I think the biggest issue with this series was the first issue, because I feel like it didn't really draw you into what the story is. But I think when we said,
I agree, because at the time I read it and I was like, oh, weird, don't really know what's going on. seems like kind of it's like a well written, but I don't know what the story's going to be. But I do think once you finish reading, like once you're done with the 12 issues, that first issue was actually vital. Or sorry, 9 issues.
You know, it's like it's
vital to the arc of the story.
I mean, I only mean that by saying like I didn't go back to the series right afterwards, so. I mean, I'm happy that it seemed to be collected now, and I might actually try to go find like a collected version now to see how it like rereads again.
I think the hardcover it came out like a couple months ago, right?
Okay, definitely check it out then. But no, I think this really does stand as my number 2. I love Joe Kelly. I love the story that he told. But
couple days ago, came out on December 20th.
Oh. Well, shit, guys.
I knew I saw it like recently. I guess it was more recent than I thought. But yeah.
I've been avoiding my comic book shop since Christmas. It scares me and my unemployed ass. So give me a job. But yeah, no, I loved Immortal Sergeant. Definitely go find our deep dive episode. But if you guys see the book on shelves, I highly recommend picking it up. It's a very excellent, well-told tale.
And I think it's like, again, it's just more proof that Joe Kelly is is a master of the medium. We obviously did their first book together, I Kill Giants. I'm pretty sure was our first ever book club.
Might have been. I mean, that book made me cry, and it's very hard for a comic book to do that.
And I think this book is not as much of a tearjerker, but certainly has as deep an emotional understanding of its characters. And I if you haven't read Immortal Sergeant this year and you're looking for, I don't want to speak for Corey, but if you're looking for one book off of my top 10, I would say this is the best book to read, just for like ease of entry and reward at the end. Immortal Sergeant's like the highest reward to effort level for sure.
It's like, it is definitely the book of the year where people, if someone like asked me for like a comic book to like pick up, and they're like
to everybody,
yeah, exactly. Like, it's like not really something that like you need to like have some investment in or be like, this is some weird shit. I would suggest this book. So I guess
I also just think
I'll take my
it's
number
really
1.
timely too, which is hard to.
Oh, it's super timely.
But yeah, Corey, what's your number 1?
Yeah, my number 1 is 8 Billion Genies by Charles Soule and art by Ryan Brown. I think I mentioned this book when I first read it. It might have been one of my elevator pitches. This book, I mean, basically the prompt of the book is that everyone on Earth gets one wish.
All at once.
And all at once. Yeah. And one bar owner decides to make his wish is to keep the bar safe and away and like protected from all the wishes outside. So it tells the tale of all the people who were in the bar at this time, and as they spend the next few years adapting to this new world that's been absolutely ravaged by a bunch of dumbasses with wishes. I mean, of course, I think the book is amazing because in the first issue you just see like, what if everybody did something stupid?
I love the sequence in the first issue where you see the world's population decreasing. It's like it's like 3 seconds after the first wish, 7 million people on Earth. It's just great.
It's just great. But I think I just really like this story. I love the tale that like Charles takes our entire so as we go through this entire cast and like the emotionality with it and like kind of. It's a long story too. I mean, like it takes the span of I want to say like pretty much close to 100 years.
Yeah.
It's exploring what it's to be like.
I think it's an idea that's really rich for plumbing, which he does. I mean,
I think the concept's amazing.
That can lend itself to a great story. Did you ever read Curse Words? His other most recent Image book.
I don't like curse words.
Yeah, see, that's the thing is I didn't particularly care for curse words either, and that's why I was. I think I picked this book up after the 4th or 5th issue as when I started it because it was getting such high praise, and I was like, "Is this the guy who did Curse Words?" I thought
it's
that book
so
was
weird,
just kind of over the top. And 8 Billion Genies is not. I think he's really honed his writing over the years.
Yeah, because I think also like the story is a focus on that, but also the way that he like thinks about it and how different people would like adapt to these different rules and these wishes and how that like would form different like sects of society is really well thought out. I'm really like happy that he was able to like kind of, I mean, I could see this probably going many different directions, but I think by itself, I thought the story was very strong. Another story I think I read all in one sitting. The hardcover is beautiful. If you guys see it out in the stands, I really recommend it. It's against Immortal Sergeant because I feel like 8 Billion Genies is just fucking out there. For people who are like, yo, this is some weird shit, but you should read it kind of vibe, where Immortal Sergeant's a bit more grounded. So if you're okay with reading something a bit more high concept, I recommend 8 Billion Genies. But for my list, I will agree with Che. If you want something a bit more grounded and well told, I'd stick with Immortal Sergeant. But I like everything on my list, so that's just
read
my
all of these
personal
books.
thoughts.
Read every single
Yeah,
one.
all these books are very good. Che, what is your number one book of the year?
My number one book this year, I'm gonna go for it. Schubeck Liebeck. No,
You got it.
No, wait, no, I didn't get it. I'm gonna go for it again. Schubeck Liebeck. I tried. I watched a YouTube video 2 hours ago at this point where Dina Muhammad, who is the writer of the book, says the title, which is a direct translation from Arabic to English of "Your wish is my command." And speaking of like, it's actually weird how we didn't plan this. It is very weird how related our books are. Basically,
Right.
this is a world. It's our world, basically. It's modern Cairo, but it's a world where wishes can be bought, and basically there's 3 tiers of wishes. But essentially, the more expensive the wish is, the more likely it is to actually give you what you want. Versus the cheap wishes are all monkey's paws.
Yeah.
And it is a not so obvious metaphor for modern society, and the story follows 3 different wishes, 3 different first class wishes, which are the expensive ones, and what people use them for. But the story has such heart and complexity, and also humor. I went into this book expecting for such really heavy topic, for such heavy themes, for it to be a pretty heavy read, but it is actually at times really funny, and then also has moments of real depth and humanity. And the opening of this book is I just, this was in my phase when I was like trying to cram in as many books as I can. I was like, I'm gonna read 50 pages of everything, and if it doesn't grab me in 50 pages, I'm just gonna put it down and be like, fuck it. It's probably not gonna become amazing after the 50th page. And I read this entire. I'm just gonna pick it up for the YouTube listeners or YouTube watchers. I read this entire book in one sitting. Now, to be fair, it is not like it's big, it's meaty. It's not a ton of words. It wasn't like a.
I mean, 8 Billion Genies is actually a pretty fucking meaty book. So maybe I can't throw too much shade at our.
Yeah, I was gonna say Corey's insanity. Of the two of us, Corey's certainly the more prolific reader.
I read so much,
but I just thought this book, the marriage of the concept and Muhammad's language. I mean, she's got such a great grasp of it's harder to come to the pros because it's been translated, but the way that people talk to each other and the relationship between the characters on the page is really beautiful. I thought this book was, like I said, I went in being like, well, it's gotta impress me, it's gotta grab me. It only has so much time, and that opening where there's this short story, basically a flashback of one of the characters' husbands buying a bunch of 3rd-tier wishes to get a Mercedes, and he like gets a toy Mercedes, and he gets the hood ornament of a Mercedes, and eventually comes with he's written an entire foolproof wish where he lists off all the parts, and it's, I wish for this life-size functional Mercedes 124 E-Class, blah blah blah, and then it drops the fucking Mercedes on the top of a building. And you're just, and it's, of course, the story is about how, like, no matter how hard these people fight, and they can't, the whole system is designed to bog them down and lock them in poverty. And the thing that is really like infuriating about this world that Muhammad has created is that wishes, which feel like, and of course all other fantasy literature, are about freeing yourself from the bonds of society and being able to like change your life and do something incredible. The wish, there's like a wish department, and you have to register all your wishes with the government, and there's all this bureaucracy, and of course they cost arms and legs and millions and billions of dollars, and the society she's created is really fascinating. I would read dozens of books set in this world. I think it's such a great concept.
I think the same thing with 8 Billion Genies too. I would follow whole different individuals with this concept too. It just feels very like two things very rich in ideas like this, and then some people write 10,000 Years of Longing. So I mean, people can do wish concepts pretty poorly as well.
I think it's 3,000 years of Longing. I actually don't like.
It felt like 10,000 years when I was watching that film.
I don't mind that movie. It was just great. It's not my favorite Idris Elba vehicle, but
my favorite is Hijack. It's 3 for fucking 3, baby.
Hijack fucking rocks, dog. Yeah, I love this book. I'm gonna try its name again. Shibek Lubeck by Dina Muhammad is an absolutely fantastic read. It's been on like everyone's list, so I'm sure if you've been on the lookout for like best comic books, you'll. I mean, that's why I picked it up. I was like, what are some comic books I missed this year that I might need to give a chance? And this one is one of the ones that really like locked me in and grabbed my attention. Anything else, Corey? Should we just run our list down and call it an end for the 2023 best ofs?
I think that's fair because I really want to blow my nose.
All right, I'll do mine pretty quick. Starting at the top 10, we've got The Riddler Year One by Paul Dano, Totem by Laura Perez, Little Monsters by Jeff Lemire, Gotham City Year One by Tom King. Coming in at number 6, Damn Them All by Simon Spurrier. Starting in my top 5, Roaming by Jillian Enrico Tamaki. Night Fever by Ed Brubaker and Sean Phillips. Number 3, Monica by Daniel Clowes. Number 2, Immortal Sergeant by Joe Kelly and Ken Nomura. And finally, my number 1, Shibek Lubeck by Dina Muhammad. Corey, what's your top 10?
My top 10 is The Sacrifices by Rick Remender and Max
Fiumurare. Stuck the landing again.
There we go. That sounds it. Number 9, Black Cloak by Kelly Thompson and Meredith McLaren. Number 8 is Immortal Thor by Al Ewing and Martin Coccolo. Number 7, Do a Powerbomb by Daniel Warren Johnson. Number 6, Gotham Year One by Tom King and Phil Hester. Number 5, Immortal X-Men by Kieran Gillen and Lucas Werneck. Monica by Daniel Clowes. Batman Superman World's Finest by Mark Waid and Dan Mora. Immortal Sergeant by Joe Kelly and Ken Nomura. And 8 Billion Genies by Charles Soule and Ryan Brown.
A lot of great books for you guys to check out. It's been an excellent year for comic books, also for TV and movies. If you haven't listened to those episodes yet, go over there and check those out. I think we've had probably the best year Corey and I both said for movies in a while. So if you're looking for movies to watch while it's cold outside and you can't go to the park or whatever because it's dark at 4 p.m. and it's going to snow on Saturday, which fucking sucks shit. Go watch some movies. We've got some great recommendations for you. But like I said, coming up, we've got a jam-packed January and we've got a jam-packed 2024 for you guys. We love making this podcast. We're going to keep doing it. Next episode is going to be all the stuff we're looking forward to most in 2024. So we should be setting ourselves up for real disappointment, I'm sure. But and then after that, we've got the Oscars and so on and so forth. And at some point, Che will go see the Aquaman movie, and maybe we'll talk about that. But don't forget, follow us at Next Time On Pod all over the place. If you're over there at youtube.com/@NextTimeOnPod, which you should be, drop us a subscribe, drop us a like. The channel's really popping off. We're hoping for a big 2024 over there. Anything else for the people, Corey?
Nothing else from me.
All right, well, that concludes our best of 2023. I've been Che.
I've been Corey.
See you guys next time.